Oh boy, where the heck do I start with this one? Welcome back to my ongoing retrospective of the God of War franchise. If you are new here, consider checking out my previous God of War videos. Here we have the black sheep of the franchise, God of War Ascension. The prequel released in 2013 after the series about an angry demigod Spartan who destroys the whole world of Greek mythology came to its explosive conclusion 3 years prior with God of War 3. And not to mention its two spin-offs, Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta, which filled in a lot of story blanks left out by the trilogy. Up to that point, the God of War franchise pretty much felt like a complete story, where we see the rise and fall of Kratos. From his harsh upbringing, to becoming the youngest Spartan captain, to losing everyone he cared about, ultimately culminating in him deciding to exact revenge on the gods, who have screwed with him his entire life. God of War 3 saw the player take Kratos' anger and rage to its highest point, indirectly resulting in the destruction of his entire homeland. Kratos finally got his revenge, but in the end, he felt empty. So, what is there to do with the series after that? Well, you could just keep going with the same gameplay formula, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that in some cases. I mean, just look at Yakuza. That series is well known for reusing assets and copy and pasting combat mechanics, but for the most part, it's still a well-beloved franchise with a huge following. And New Super Mario Bros? It was fun while it lasted. God of War Ascension released in March 2013 and was met with mixed reception. And as I've said earlier, it is one of, if not, the least popular and talked about game in the God of War franchise. So what went wrong with this game? Well, let's have a look. The game is set before the events of Chains of Olympus, making this the first game chronologically in the God of War timeline. Chains of Olympus did a good job at showing elements of Kratos' fatherhood and his love for his daughter Calliope. Ghost of Sparta dived deep into Kratos' childhood and excellently showcased the events that turned him into the hardened warrior he would become, and how he reached his mental breaking point after the death of his brother and mother. A good prequel should add good subtext to the other entries of a series, including depth to characters and events that would lead to what we already know about, which I believe God of War Ghost of Sparta brilliantly succeeded at, earning its place in the God of War timeline. So, does God of War Ascension's story have anything substantial to add to the God of War canon? Well, to be honest, yes, but mostly no. First of all, at face value, the premise seems a bit unnecessary. The game is set after Kratos was tricked into killing his wife and daughter, and his goal throughout Ascension is to sever his oath bondage to Ares. The problem? We already know the outcome of this whole ordeal thanks to the first freaking game. Ascension's story on several occasions flashes back and forth between a small time gap, opening with Kratos being captured by the game's villains, the Furies, who are the wives of Ares. Greek mythology, everyone. They torture Kratos as punishment for going back on his oath to Ares, and chain him up with the Blades of Chaos.
Hi honey, we have Kratos, but we can't remove those blades you stuck to his wrists. Could you come down here and get them off him for us?
Not now! I'm busy, I've got important work to do!
Playing ancient Fortnite against Athena again? Just give it a rest already, you're never going to beat her!
Shut up! Just leave him tied up with the blades! That should be fine!
Are you for real?
And no surprise, Kratos being chained up with his deadliest weapons allows him to break free and kill all the Furies. And after he kills one of them, we cut back to 3 weeks earlier where he meets their son Orcos, keeper of those who pledge oaths to his father. Feeling a change of heart after witnessing Ares' cruel prank on Kratos, he decides to assist the Spartan with severing his bond to the dumbass of war. We also gain some insight to Ares' plan to use Kratos to burn Olympus to the ground. So in 2 ways, Ares was responsible for setting the marked warrior prophecy in motion, which does add more weight to his last words.
I was trying to make you a great warrior.
You succeeded.
The game also has a few moments that show more of Kratos' role as a father and husband. Kratos expresses how much he missed his daughter growing up, while fulfilling his duties as a Spartan. I do love when the series shows moments like this. Even if Kratos wasn't ideal at his role as a husband and father, his love for his wife and daughter is crystal clear. And it shows that even before the reboot came along, Kratos has always been a loving father above all else, even if he had difficulty showing it. But that's what living in the harsh world of Greek mythology will do to you. The game shows more of Kratos' human side than any of the previous games. A time where he was still able to crack a joke and show concern for others. And he actually says this at the end of the game before killing Orikos.
I have spilled enough innocent blood.
That is quite a far cry from the first time we see him in the first game, where he kills the boat captain without a second thought. And especially by God of War 3, where his anger towards the gods has consumed him, and after all the losses he has suffered, no length is extreme enough to stop him from exacting his revenge on Zeus. So God of War Ascension's story does have some neat moments, and further showcases how far Kratos fell as a person, losing himself to his rage, but as a whole, the story has little consequence on the overall storyline of the God of War series. That's not to say it's bad all around, it's fine for what it is, and the performances for the characters are good as usual. This is the first game to utilize motion capture and voiceover simultaneously, and this time the sound mixing is much better. From what I can remember anyways. T.C. Carson gives a great performance as usual, from his yells to his emotional moments. I always feel a sense of satisfaction hearing his angry roars during combat. TC really sells at making Kratos sound like he will stop at nothing, tearing through anything that stands in his way, and does a great job for Kratos' emotional moments that show his humanity beyond the monster. It's a shame that this is the last time T.C. Carson ever got to voice Kratos, but all around, he did a fantastic job creating the voice for one of gaming's angriest and emotionally scarred warriors.
Place your offerings for Aletheia. We will decide if they are worthy of our will.
I offer nothing.
The Furies are all played by actresses who have had roles in previous or future God of War games. Megara is played by Nika Futterman, who would later play the Valkyrie Rota in the Norse games. The voice of Atropos from God of War 2, Debbie Mae West, would take on the role of Tisphone. And finally, the leader of the Furies, Alecto, is played by a well-known voice actress, Jennifer Hale, who is known for voicing Samus and being the latest voice of Bayonetta. She also had two roles in Ghost of Sparta, being Arenas and the younger version of Kratos' mother, Callisto. And finally, Troy Baker, another well-known voice actor in the gaming industry, fills the role of Orikos. All around, the cast did a good job. Again, the story as a whole is not bad on its own. It serves its purpose for what it is. The problem is, it feels very inconsequential to the rest of the God of War timeline, since it doesn't add too much that we don't already know thanks to the previous games. But at least the gameplay's still fun, right? Right? Oh fuck, where do I start? So, in an attempt to keep the combat fresh, God of War Ascension tries changing up the formula by changing things around. But unfortunately, from my experience of playing the game, they just ended up butchering the combat. This time, the Blades of Chaos are your only weapons, and throughout the game, you will gain elements that carry unique magic and rage attacks. The problem? You have to upgrade each element with your orbs to unlock each magic and rage attack, and the magic bar is now broken up into separate pieces. So not only is the magic more limited in this game, you have to unlock each of the magic attacks when that was not the case in the previous games. You have 4 magic attacks to work with in correspondence to each element at your disposal, and again you have to unlock them, which is kind of annoying for someone who preferred how the previous games handled it. The Fire of Ares magic attack allows Kratos to slam his blades on the ground, followed by a quicktime event. The Ice of Poseidon lets you freeze your enemies, or slow them down depending on how strong they are. The Lightning of Zeus, as you would expect, electrocutes enemies in your vicinity as you mash the R1 and L1 buttons. And the Soul of Hades releases the Arms of Hades, and with the Soul of Hades equipped, the blades will unleash soul attacks just like the Claws of Hades from God of War 3. As for the rage attacks, they don't work as you normally would expect.
What?
You charge up the bar by dealing damage, but taking damage depletes the bar. But if you manage to fill it all the way, you can press L3 and R3 to perform a quick elemental attack. So yeah, the rage no longer gives you the usual damage boost that you would expect, and you have to ensure that you don't get hit, which I struggle with a lot in God of War games, especially this one. And the old moves that you could easily do in the old God of War games are now locked to the rage meter being full, so you better pray that you don't get hit a lot. Who thought this was a good design choice? Kratos' controls have also been changed heavily. For example, you can use R1 to grapple enemies, which seems cool, but it's now essentially your grab button, as the circle button is now a kick button. Why is this? Ascension introduces a new mechanic that allows you to pick up weapons off the ground, from swords to spears to shields. I can probably understand why this change was made, more on that later, but I still prefer the old control layouts. In fact, that just goes for the combat in general, because the enemies in this game are more annoying than ever with their blocking, and I ended up getting boxed a lot. And it didn't help that the parry mechanic now requires a second button input. In the previous games, you just had to press L1 at the exact right moment to perform a parry, but in this game, you have to press L1 and then the X button to parry. It's somewhat manageable, but I still don't like it. And it doesn't help that I'm not quite a pro at God of War games with how quick the enemies hit you. You can be a jerk and say that I suck and should get good at the game, but let me ask you this. Why should I get good at a game if I'm not enjoying the game? I may not be the best God of War player out there, and I may get hit a lot, but at least in the older games, I'm able to push through and have fun, which is not the case with Ascension's gameplay. The changes it made to the combat, and the enemies being more annoying than ever, just made for an experience that was not fun for me. The gameplay from my perspective feels like a step back of what came before. As for the puzzles, they're still pretty well utilized. Some revolve around the items that you acquire throughout the game. The Amulet of Ouroboros allows you to manipulate objects, moving them forward or backwards through time. So think of the Time Stone from Doctor Strange. And in some cases, you will have to stop mid-process to use an object as a platform or to solve a puzzle. The Oath Stone of Orcos can be used to create a clone of Kratos, to assist in combat or puzzles that require an extra pair of hands. Kratos' Mansion 3, the Goo of Sparta, and the Eyes of Truth simply remove obstacles blocking your path. The puzzles are still pretty well crafted, so nothing really wrong there. And if there's one positive that this game has over the others, it's the spectacle. Specifically when Kratos slides down a surface and has to make a jump and swing to the next location. This game certainly has a lot of well done action scenes and camera shots. Now, I can't really put my finger on it, but the graphics don't look quite as good as God of War 3. I don't know, maybe the colors just pop a little too much for my liking. But the game still looks pretty good. The environments and details are still very well done for a late PlayStation 3 game. The music this time is composed by Tyler Bates, known for composing the first two Guardians of the Galaxy films. And Tyler does a pretty good job. The God of War melody, and especially the Vengeful Spartan, are used very well throughout the game. God of War Ascension also features an online multiplayer mode. It was one of the late PlayStation 3 games that required an online pass in order to play online. And if I'm not mistaken, only 8 games are still active to this day, which includes God of War Ascension. This must have been around the time Sony saw how much money Microsoft were raking in from their Xbox Live passes, and wanted in on that dough. They especially needed it after their servers got hacked in 2011. Unfortunately, the online pass that came with my copy of God of War Ascension has probably already been used by the previous owner, because it didn't seem to work when I entered the code on the PlayStation 3 store. However, it should still be accessible if you purchase the online pass digitally, or if you stream the game through PlayStation Plus Premium. I guess this is the most appropriate God of War game to be on a streaming subscription, since the online mode is... well, it's online. And from what I have gathered, the game does have a small fanbase that keeps the game going, and they are really good at the game. I guess that's 13 years of dedication well spent for most of those players. And as a GameStop pre-order bonus, you could even play as King Leonidas from 300. You know, the This Is Sparta man!
This is Sparta!
Personally, I don't have too much interest in the multiplayer mode. With the whole paywall hurdles, and with it being a 13-year-old game, the chances of actually getting a match going will probably take a lot of time and patience from my experience with trying online modes for decade-old games. But it's nice to know that God of War Ascension's online mode has some dedicated fans. Maybe I will cover it in the future in its own video, when I have the time to figure out how to get it up and running. But I figured I would at least give it some attention for the purpose of this review since it was a big selling point for the game. And that was God of War Ascension. And I'm sorry to those Ascension fans out there, but this game did not do it for me. The story overall wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it had little to add to the overall storyline of the series. And the gameplay just outright ruined the experience for me. It feels like a step back of what came before, with the changes it made to the controls, the mechanics, and the enemies being more of a pain in the ass than usual. The music is still good, along with the acting, and the game has lots of great action set pieces, and again it's nice to know that the multiplayer mode is enjoyed by some. But personally, this is my least favorite God of War game, and I did not have a very good time with it. But in a series with consistently solid games, one not so good game is not something to scoff at. And I know that I'm not alone with being dissatisfied with Ascension, but if you like it, good for you, continue to enjoy it, more power to you. But if you're someone who is looking to get into the God of War series for the first time, personally, I would say you could easily skip this one. But at the end of the day, it's up to you whether you want to try this game or not and form your own opinion. Despite my negative experience playing this game, that's not to say it had nothing going for it. It clearly had the same amount of production value and care as the previous God of War games. And the story did have some merit behind it, showcasing the most human side of Kratos before he was driven to madness. And with the addition of the multiplayer and new mechanics, it's clear that the devs wanted to keep the series fresh, while trying to stay true to what it was. Unfortunately though, this game just wasn't my thing. You might say that I'm being unfair to it, or that I'm neglecting it as much as others have back in the day, but in the end, it doesn't change the fact that I simply just did not enjoy God of War Ascension. It's not the worst game I have ever played, but I don't feel like giving it any further attention and time than I already have. Sorry again to any fans of this game, but in my opinion, God of War Ascension stands as the low point in a series with much higher quality games and better gameplay mechanics. So needless to say, I do not plan on replaying God of War Ascension anytime soon, since this series has much better games to offer that I can personally get much more fun out of and feel are much more worth my time. Speaking of which, tune in next time.
Now, you are ready.
For what?
A new beginning.